Well, hello everyone. Fina here from Fina Reads. Welcome back to a new bi-weekly book ramblings, which is also going to be my March wrap-up. There's a lot that I want to talk about besides March wrap-up and besides what I've read in the last 2 weeks, so I'll better get going and don't ramble too much today. Starting with the stats for March. By the way, if you're not interested in stats, just jump forward. I put chapters into the description, so you should be able to just skip that. If you like stats, well, hello and welcome. In March, I read 8 books and about 2,500 pages, which is less than what I'd like to average, but I had a couple of chunkers in there and then a couple of really short ones. Anyway. It really doesn't matter. Out of the books that I read, it was 3 fantasy, 1 sci-fi, 2 kind of thriller horror books, and 1 nonfiction. And I've read quite a bit all over the place. 1 book was from a Latina author, 2 books were from the same author that has an Asian heritage. I think she lives in Canada now, but Asian heritage. She was born in the Philippines. And 3 were North American authors, and 1 had various authors. I didn't look up every individual one of them where they're from. But the books that I read, though, were really, really good. I only had 1 3-star read, 3 4-star reads, and 4 5-star reads, which is incredible. So I'm really excited about, even though I read less, I read books that I really, really enjoyed. And that's all that matters at the end of the day. If you want to review for any of those in more detail, I've talked about all of the ones that I've read in March in earlier reviews, so you can go into any of my bi-weekly book ramblings. So let's finish this out then. So Radicalized is our 4 short stories, so this is kind of an anthology, although some of those are 100 pages long. So I don't know if 100 pages classifies it as short story, but it's 4 shorter stories in this book called Unauthorized Bread, Model Minority, Radicalized, and The Mask of the Red Death. And it's more a dystopian kind of view, and what Cory Doctorow is doing is he's taking 4 topics and kind of exaggerating them a little bit and showing what could happen in a not too distant future. It's just thinking through different aspects of life and, you know, what it actually means or how it could impact someone that is affected by those situations. So Unauthorized Bread is, I think, actually capitalism, but he also covers immigration issues with that story. Model Minority is about racism. Radicalized is about the US health system, and The Mask of the Red Death is kind of what happens if the world explodes and you have to kind of live in your shelter, and if you have a lot of money but end up with no one around you. I don't know. It's a weird summary. I don't really have a good way of summarizing that. It was not what I thought this book would be. I thought it would be more from a humoristic view, but it's rather straightforward. If you like stuff like this, if you like dystopian books like this is, I think, one of those that you should definitely read and check out. But if you're not interested in that type of, like, having a sci-fi angle, a dystopian angle on these social issues, then there's no point in you reading this book. Because, again, he is really straightforward with his writing. There's not a lot of humor. He is actually, you know, putting it out there the way it is and just exaggerating it a little bit. This is really what it is. The writing is good. I mean, I flew through the stories. I thought it was very well done. And he hit on a lot of really good points and made me think in several situations, especially on the Model Minority one that was about racism. Because as someone who hasn't dealt with racial issues personally, it made me think every now and then. And that is a good thing. That's what you want from a book like this, I think. That you just start thinking about, well, what could you do differently, right? It helps you understand the other side a little bit better. For that, I thought it was good. The other book that I finished in March is Running Man by Stephen King. I'll keep it rather short here as well because Jake and I actually talked about that in more detail in our live show a week ago, I think, where we talked about the first 3 Richard Bachman books that we've read together over January, February, March, which was The Long Walk, Road Work, and then Running Man. And we had a non-spoiler section, and then we talked spoiler stuff, which of course was the majority of the video, because you have to dive deep into those books. You have to talk spoilers about those books, because that's where these books get really, really interesting. So out of the 3, this is not my favorite Bachman. It's actually, out of the 3, my least favorite one, but it still got 4 stars. It's very different than book 1 and 2 from the character depth type of perspective. This is more a plot-driven book. And here it is more about a guy trying to run away from the hunters that are trying to kill him as part of the game that is part of here. So just in case you've never read it, this book is about Ben. He lives in a really poor area. He has a sick daughter and he can't afford the medical bills for his daughter. So he decides to join the games that the rich people put together to entertain themselves and to enable the poor people to earn some money. So again, dystopian, very, very similar to Long Walk in that regards, but this is more set in the future, whereas Long Walk I felt was more written in a to-date type of time period. He goes to that TV channel that hosts all of those game shows and is basically starting to sign up for one of them. And the way you sign up is not you say, hey, I want to play in this game show, but you go there, they do a bunch of tests, they dehumanize you. And I thought that was really interesting how that was done in the first about third of the book. Like the further he got, the more dehumanized he became. And then they tell you which game is the right one for you. And he is chosen for the game called The Running Man, where you essentially run for your life. And you get money for every hour or for every day, I'm not quite sure anymore, for every hour or for every day you survive. And if you survive 30 days, which no one ever even came close to, then you get $1 million. There were 2 other books that I started in March. One of them I'm still continuing on reading and I'm not planning on talking about it much. That is High King's Tomb by Kristen Britton, book 3 in the Green Rider series. I very slowly made my way through that and I've read, I don't know, a handful of chapters over the last 2 weeks. So it's still ongoing. I think I'm about 40% in by now. The other book that I started in March, which I knew I wouldn't get done in March, but I just got it done. That was a weird intro for this book. Anyway, I read Ruin of Kings, which is book 1 in the Chorus of Dragons, is I think what the series is called, by Jen Lyons. And I had that on my I really want to read this list for quite some time. And for whatever reason, I never had a reason to actually pick it up. But now I did, because there was a read-along on Shelf Space, on the Shelf Space Discord. And I thought, you know what? Reading with other people is always the most fun. So I'm adding this to my TBR. It was actually not the original plan. So I finished this chunker on Friday, and I'm really intrigued. I mean, okay, where do I start? There's so much to say about this book. So first of all, I loved the way the story was told. You start the story basically today, and then you have 2 people that talk to each other, and they are telling their view of the same story till now. So they are basically going into the past and then they're telling their story till now, both from their point of view. And it is so well done. I can see why that might be off-putting for some people, but I personally loved the way the story was told and the way each chapter jumped between the 2 back and forth. I really loved the way she pulled it off, and I think it's not easy to pull something like this off because it gets confusing at points. And you have to pay a little bit of attention of some things that she keeps mentioning, she being Jen Lyons, the author, keeps mentioning here and there. But generally, so the general story, you can follow along pretty easily, I thought. The other thing that I really liked about this book is the humor. The main character, is really sarcastic and I loved it. There are footnotes in there where both of the narrators sometimes explain something in more detail or just add a commentary to it, like, I don't believe this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And you have that sarcastic undertone in there all the time, and I love this. It reminded me of Bartimaeus. If you've never read that, it's more a middle grade book, but it has a very similar flair to it, and I ate that up. Next up, that world, there's a lot going on. The magic system and the way the lineages of the people, the gods, the things you can do in this world add to this story potentially becoming confusing. And I'm glad that I had people to read it with, because we had a couple of situations where we're like, wait, hang on a second, why is this happening now? So there are those moments. And the thing is, while you have a glossary and a family tree in the back, they're actually spoilers because they show the situation at the end of the book. because there are some things that are moving and fluid in the way you learn, like how someone's family is structured. Like there's fluidity in that, and political intrigue, and a couple of things, you know, that just when you learn something that is not necessarily the actual reality. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is how this, I mean, it just can get confusing, and you just have to roll with it. You cannot analyze everything. You cannot sit there and it's like, hey, this doesn't make any sense. You just have to start the book, read it one page, one chapter after another, and then at the end, it's starting to make sense. And there are situations at the end where you're still not quite there. I mean, that's why there's a 5-book series, right? But boy, this was good. I definitely want to know how it continues. I want to know what happens with the main character. I want to know what happens with, in general, the world and everything that happened in the last 100 pages. Like, I want to know what the impact of this is. And I want to know how they're getting out of the situation. And it's just so good. This is everything I was hoping for and so much more. Before I go into the books that I'm currently reading and what I want to read in April, I want to also briefly talk about some other things that are just channel related going on and just channel updates. So if you haven't seen yet, last week I put out an announcement about a new live show series that I want to start on my channel. It's about diversifying your reading and just talking about certain diverse topics as part of a live show with other people, so we can talk about our favorite books that match that topic. That was actually really well received, and I got a lot of feedback and a lot of positive comments, people that are excited about this topic, so I'm excited. Several things happening on the diversity live show front. First of all, April 23rd is the kickoff, and it's not just, as I announced in my video, it's not just Philip and Chaz. Ercy and Johanna are also joining us on that live show. I'm so excited about this kickoff and just the general conversation around what we're looking for when it comes to diversity in books, and you know what our favorite diverse books are, and if as fantasy readers, because that's what the majority of the group is, if we are more open to diversity in books, because that's the very nature of a fantasy and a sci-fi story. And then I've already got so many people that said they want to join different topics that I ended up scheduling 2 live shows in May, even though I only wanted to do 1 a month. But I have already 2 in May. The first one is going to happen on May 7, and if this is something you're interested in, please let me know. We still have some spots open. That is going to be mental health representation in fantasy books and which books we like that have a really good mental health representation. And for that one, I'm already joined by Kate from the Literary Apothecary and RJ from RJ Gibson, and I'm posting their channels down below, so you can find them there. The second topic in May is going to be books with an Asian inspiration and or by Asian authors. And there I'm going to be joined by Jake from the Bookish Drummer and his girlfriend Stacey. That is currently planned for the Memorial Day weekend, which is 28th and 29th of May, I think. So if Asian inspiration is something you want to talk about and you have favorite books with Asian inspiration, let me know. Again, there are also spots open. And then the last one I want to talk about is June, because I'm getting ready for that one as well. I want to talk about LGBTQ representation of books, LGBTQ authors, and for that one, Ercy already signed up and wants to join me in that conversation. We haven't picked a date quite yet, but if that is something you're interested in, let me know. All right, quickly talking about the 2 books that I'm currently reading. The first one is more Stephen King, because Jake and I are continuing with our Bachman read. The next 3 months are going to be Thinner, which is April, May is Regulators, and June is Blaze. And I'm excited about all of them. Thinner is a reread for me. I've read that forever ago in German, so it's actually the first time reading it in English. But it has been so long ago, I barely remember anything. And I started with it, so I'm still early on, like in the first 40 pages, but I'm loving it already. It's the typical Bachman writing and being in someone's head type of situations. And the second book that I'm currently in the middle of reading is Blood Dazzler by Patricia Smith, which is more a collection of poems. And Patricia Smith wrote those for Katrina in 2008, so Hurricane Katrina. So all the poems are about what happened on those days where Hurricane Katrina went over New Orleans, and, you know, just her experience and what she went through and what New Orleans went through. I'm really intrigued by this one because I'm usually not someone who goes out of their way to read poems. This one was put into the Sisterhood of the Traveling Book Box by Stephanie from Miss Richard Reads. If you have no idea what the Sisterhood of the Traveling Book Box is, I'm linking this down below so you can enjoy that. It was a lot of fun, I'm telling you that much. Since I had it here, I did not want to read it. So I decided to pick it up as well because April's also Poetry Month, and this is nice and thin, so it's a nice introduction into poetry, and I thought, you know, worst case, I don't like it. But if I do, this is a quick way for me to figure out if I do. I don't know. This sounds really bad. I'm enjoying this. I really do. And I'm not just saying it. I would not show the book if I wouldn't enjoy it. I've read 3 or 4 poems so far. I'm not reading one after another and quickly reading through it just to get through it. I'm actually savoring them. Every now and then between this or just before I start reading this, I read one poem, maybe read it 2 or 3 times. And I'm admiring how she is using words to paint the picture. And it's more, I mean, it is an art form. Poetry to me is an art form. And I find it so interesting how my mind reacts to the words she is putting there. It's painting a picture. Like, I'm not the most visual reader in the world. I can imagine certain things, but I don't imagine everything. This is doing something for me where I don't know how to put it, but I can see the things she is trying to tell me. The one that I really liked is actually the prologue to this book. It's a 2-page poem where she describes New Orleans as a city and who New Orleans is and what she does to you when you are there. I'm really fascinated by this, and I'm not planning on rushing through it or anything, but as I said, savoring page by page, giving poetry a shot, a way that I might explore more going forward. So yeah, in the middle of this, I'll probably get through it in April, since it is only like 70 pages long, but I definitely want to savor it. The last book that I want to talk about, which is going to be my next big chunker after I'm done with Thinner, and that is The Grace of Kings, another fantasy series that I'm so excited about. I'm really excited. First of all, I have the UK cover, and can we please all admire these colors and the design? And I'm so mad at myself that I was at the Broken Binding who had the 3 books as hardcover with the colored spines. I would love to get my hands on that. I don't care if I like this book or not. Just the cover and just this design is all worth it. This is a read-along that Ian the Reader is hosting, and he's actually hosting that on Andrew's and Nico's The Wizardly Duo Discord. Ian is hosting a live show on April 24th where several people will talk about that. We don't have a time yet, but there are like 6 or 7 people who wanted to talk with Ian about this book, and I'm one of those people. So first of all, I have to read it to be ready for the live show. Second of all, I really, really want to read it, and I'm really excited about it. Similar to The Rune of Kings, this one. It's one of those that I've looked at for a while already and really wanted to read. I just needed a group of people to read it with me because it makes a book just so much more enjoyable. That is my next big chunker. And then for April in general, my TBR, I'm not even going to show it to you because it's a big mess and it's a thing full of big books that I will not be able to read all of them. So I'm just going with the flow here. That was a lot of information about a lot of live shows and about a lot of different things. I'm making sure definitely go check out the description for the links to all the channels that I mentioned, for the links to all the videos that I mentioned, and then I'm putting a list of other live shows on there as well and on which channel those live shows are happening. Let me know down in the comments if you're joining any of the read-alongs, and then I hope I'll see you soon with my next video. Bye!